Hello, this is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose Dylan. Google Podcast, Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio. This is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose Dylan. So we got a shorter podcast today, but podcast's all the same. But yeah, it's like I told you guys. I'm gonna go for whatever I can. I'm gonna get in as many podcasts and as long a podcast as I can, always. But I also don't want to bore you guys. I know some of my podcasts go on for an hour. And all I know right now is I have 242 downloads. Which doesn't necessarily mean I'm successful, but it doesn't mean I shouldn't say successful, but it doesn't mean you guys enjoy the hour-long podcast. I have no idea how long you listen to me, but I try not to make them too short, but also not too long. There's a gray area in there that I've been trying to find. I think 30 minutes is usually reasonable for length, but today is going to be shorter than that. And I do talk a lot in these podcasts. I kind of ramble on a few times. But I try to keep it as short and to the point as possible. So we only actually have 3 things to cover, and I'm just going to see how long the podcast is, and however long it is what it will be. So, Dan Orlovsky, former football player, played 12 seasons, typically a backup. A backup for the most part. He's now a football analyst for ESPN. He does a good job, but he did say something that kind of caught my eye that I really disagreed with, saying that the Niners are no longer contenders without Brandon Aiyuk because he's just so important to the offense. Well, let's get to this. Whenever someone says something that I disagree with, obviously my first reaction is to, disagree with it, and kind of argue my point, but, try to hear them out, hear their case. But, the Niners, back in 2019, when they made the Super Bowl, 13-3, right, their roster, first of all, Jimmy Garoppolo as quarterback, and their receivers, they had Kittle, who was fantastic, who they will still have in this case. But let's look through some of their other receivers, right? I mean, Marquise Goodwin, Emmanuel Sanders, Kendrick Bourne, Dante Pettis. They had Deebo Samuel, who they will also still have in this case. So what I'm saying is losing Brandon Aiyuk, I don't think, how are they much different? If they lose Brandon Aiyuk, how are they worse than the 2019 team that made the Super Bowl and led the Super Bowl into the fourth quarter? Right? Because they upgraded at quarterback. I think Purdy's much better than Jimmy G, much more talented, much bigger upside. Receiving core, you still got Deebo Samuel, you still got George Kittle. And then, Brandon Aiyuk is just, he does a lot. He's a great player, very useful, but he's a major upgrade from Goodwin and Emmanuel Sanders, who was aging. So they can honestly just sign an older, experienced receiver, or I don't even know. I'm just saying they don't really need Brandon Aiyuk, especially when in 2019 the 2 running backs for there were 3 running backs primarily for the Niners: Matt Breida, Tevin Coleman, and Raheem Mostert. They got CMC now. So, if they have a better quarterback now, a much better running game now, and defense is still great, and a similar receiving core, how are they no longer contenders without Brandon Aiyuk when they pretty much have a similar, if not better, roster than they had back in 2019? Right, because I'll tell you right now, that division, they're going to win that division without Brandon Aiyuk. Without Brandon Aiyuk, they're a top 3 team in the NFC still. And they're coming off of a Super Bowl appearance. So, I did say yesterday, I don't think they're going to trade Brandon Ayuk. I don't think they're going to go that length. But the thing is, I don't see Brandon Ayuk, like, if he does get traded, I don't see it changing too much, right? If he does get traded, I see them as an upgraded version of the 2019 team. You know, and they're probably still a top 2 team in the NFC. Because they're still better than the Cowboys, still better than the Packers, still better than the Eagles, who are constantly going down my list in the NFC. Still better than the Rams. I can't even think of any other NFC teams that would compete with them other than the Lions. You know, I guess I would argue maybe the Lions have a better roster on paper. Like, the Lions probably have a better roster on paper if Ayuk leaves, but then there's the coaching experience. Kyle Shanahan's been to 3 Super Bowls, 2 as a head coach, 1 as an OC. And yeah, he's lost all 3 of them, but that's still, he's done more than Dan Campbell has. And Dan Campbell last year, I get what he was trying to do, but it was ultimately the wrong decision in the NFC Championship, going for on 4th down. So, you know, I think Brandon Ayuk leaving, it's not going to kill their Super Bowl chances at all. It'll make the Lions, it will close the gap a little bit between the Lions and the Niners. Because right now, with Ayuk, I think the Niners have a decent gap on the Lions in the NFC. If Ayuk leaves, the gap kind of closes, but not too much, you know? At the end of the day, like I said, that 2019 roster, they didn't have a Brandon Ayuk, and they didn't need one. They didn't even have a CMC. They still made the Super Bowl. It's because Kyle Shanahan, his offensive adjustment, and his player development, that's what got them to the Super Bowl. And they didn't need a fantastic roster on paper. Like, if I told you a team had Jimmy Garoppolo, Tevin Coleman, Raheem Mostert, Debo, Kittle, and Marquise Goodwin, yeah, they're a talented team, but they don't look like a Super Bowl team on paper. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I mean, Brandon Ayuk leaving, it doesn't kill the Niners too much. Their offense will be a little less explosive. That's the one change it will make. But, alright. Next thing I wanted to talk about was the MLB All-Star Game yesterday, 5-3, the AL won. MVP Jarren Duran. He had, what did he do? Jarren Duran, I can't even find his stat line right now. I had it written down before. 1 for 2, 1 homer. You know, in these All-Star games, everyone gets like 2 at-bats pretty much, so it all makes sense. Yeah. I mean, the AL is always kind of superior to the NL. And, you know, they're not even 100 games into the season, but I feel like I can already tell you what the top 3 teams look like right now. The Phillies look fantastic. They absolutely dominated the Dodgers and the Yankees. Yes, injuries have something to do with it, but it just seems like the Phillies had a major upper hand on the Dodgers, and the Dodgers had an upper hand on the Yankees, unfortunately. But I think the Phillies, a fully healthy Dodgers, and then you got the Orioles and Guardians, they look the strongest right now. I like the Yankees. I think they have a lot of talent, but they're 4-6 in their last 10, and they just lost a big series to the. They did get a 2. They won 2 out of 3 against the Orioles. I'll give them that. But losing the series to the Rays was big, and losing that game to the Orioles was big because we could be going into this series with the Rays, because we're going Rays, Orioles, Rays right now. Those are a lot of crucial games, right? If we beat the Orioles yesterday, we're at the top of the division because we, in that case, would be 59-39, while the Orioles 58-39, right? So we win that game. We're top of the division going into the series against the Rays, and instead, we're going into the series off of a loss. And I think we're still going to beat the Rays because we're just better than them. You know, even with how we've been playing, we're still better than the Rays. But, you know, I'm hoping to God they turn it around. But right now, the top three strongest teams right now, Guardians, Phillies, Dodgers. The Yankees got to pick things up. And honestly, what's lacking this year that they had a lot in the 2017 year, in the 2019 year when they were making deep runs. What's lacking is in both those times, 2017, 2019, they had all these like call-ups from the minor league, you know. You had Mike Tauchman hitting, Luke Voigt came out of nowhere. 2017, Aaron Judge's rookie year. You know, you had all these surprising players coming out of the farm system that were already... The great thing about the Yankees farm system is they have a bunch of guys that are MLB ready, just waiting to come out. But I think we just don't always make the right use out of them, right? They should be... Like, if you notice a player struggling continuously, you notice Stanton getting up there in age and becoming slightly inconsistent, call someone up. And as a matter of fact, he's still injured. Like Stanton, I'll give it to him. He's been pretty good for the Yankees. He hasn't been exactly what I think they were looking for. You know, that power hitter next to Judge, making them an unstoppable duo. But this year he was on pace for a great year. He had 18 homers in 69 games, 246 batting average, which isn't great, but it's pretty standard for Stanton. He's a power hitter, not a contact guy. But yeah, if he's injured right now, why not call someone up instead of just using your bench guys? You know, just call up one of the people from the farm system that are like, they're probably, even though they're not in the MLB right now, probably more talented than the guys we're playing with right now. So, I mean, it's a tough call, but yeah. I mean, the main point, this segment, as I'm currently rambling on, top three strongest teams in baseball at the end of the All-Star break: Dodgers, Phillies, Guardians. And the AL is stronger than the NL. Alright, the final thing I wanted to talk about today as we approach the 15-minute mark almost. So, a story came out. The Jets had talked to Arthur Smith about assisting Nathaniel Hackett in calling plays. Now, as I said, the Jets are a very interesting team. If Aaron Rodgers returns to form and stays fully healthy, they are in a position... I don't think they're making the Super Bowl, but I think they're in a position to make a deep playoff run if Rodgers is fully healthy in the AFC. They got Garrett Wilson, the number one receiver. They got Breece Hall. I would probably put him at number 5 in the league at running backs. They have an offensive line that's developed, but still not fantastic. But, you know, their defense is one of the best in the league as it has been the last 5 years. So they have what it takes to be a Super Bowl team. They just need their quarterback to stay healthy. And that's a lot to ask from a 40-year-old who just tore his Achilles. So that's why, to me, the Jets are the most interesting team heading into next season. Is because they can be really good. If Aaron Rodgers stays healthy. And that's kind of a big if. Like Rodgers, he's not exactly injury prone. He had the broken collarbone in 2017. More recently, the Achilles. So he's 2 injuries over. He's been in the league 19 years, 16 as a starter. 2 injuries in that amount of time isn't injury prone, but he's entering his 40s. And once you get to that age, especially when you played football for more than 15 years, you're not going to recover the same as you used to. So we'll see how it goes, but listen, it's not good for Nathaniel. It's not a good look for Nathaniel Hackett that the Jets were looking to get him assistant in calling plays. And I think honestly, Rodgers getting hurt last year was the worst thing that happened to Nathaniel Hackett. The same way getting hired as a head coach was the worst thing that happened to Adam Gase, because both those guys, both Adam Gase and Nathaniel Hackett, sat behind great quarterbacks with great minds that apparently always adjusted their plays, and they got credit for it. Like, Adam Gase, people forget, he was an offensive coordinator when Peyton Manning was on the Broncos. So, while Peyton Manning is calling Omaha every 5 seconds, calling audibles every 5 seconds, Adam Gase is sitting back looking like a genius because the Broncos' offense is fantastic. And then Adam Gase gets hired by the Dolphins. He does okay the first year, and then we just slowly see him get worse and worse. Then he gets hired by the Jets, and he's a disaster. And then a similar thing happens to Nathaniel Hackett, right? He sits behind Rodgers all these years, and the Packers front office has complained before about Rodgers changing plays a lot. Of course, we all know why. How? Because Nathaniel Hackett coaches the Browns, goes one and done. Or sorry, not the Browns, the Broncos, goes one and done. And then moves on to be the offensive coordinator for the Jets, because now Aaron Rodgers is going to be there, and then Rodgers gets hurt, and we see just how bad he is at offensive play calling. Like, specifically offensive play calling, because we know he wasn't a good head coach, but some guys are just coordinators, right? Todd Bowles is a great defensive coordinator, horrible head coach, all right? But we found out Nathaniel Hackett, neither. He's neither an offensive genius or NFL genius at all. But yeah, not a good look for Nathaniel Hackett. I still think the Jets are in a decent spot. I think the toughest challenge in the division for them is the Dolphins. If you ask me today who I think is winning the AFC East, I would bet on the Dolphins. And Tua's had his injury problems too, but he's not 40. He's in his 20s still. So I would guess the Dolphins win the AFC East. The Bills, I think, are in for... They're probably going to take a fall. Like I said, I had Sean McDermott. When I went over Colin Cowherd's top 10 coaches, I said Sean McDermott belongs in the top 10, but no higher than number 9, because, like I said, Sean McDermott is number 9, but he's slowly falling on my list. Right? Because when Brian Dable was there, they did fantastic, the Bills. That's because Sean McDermott is a defensive guy, which is not a problem with that. But what we've seen from the Steelers is defensive head coaches need a good offensive coordinator, right? That's why the Steelers weren't able to go far last year, is because they had Matt Canada, the worst OC in the league, and then a defensive coach in Mike Tomlin, right? So like Sean McDermott, defensive head coach, but he had Brian Daboll, who was great as a coordinator. And that allowed for great defensive play by the Bills as well as great offensive play. And now he still has Josh Allen, but I think last year we kind of saw Sean McDermott get exposed as a much better defensive coach than he is a head coach. Right? So he's number 9 and falling, but yeah. The Jets, I can see getting second in the division, maybe vying for a wild card spot in that ridiculously stacked AFC. Who knows? But yeah. That is it for today. 20 minutes, actually. I kind of rambled on a lot for 3 segments, but I'll take it. Anytime I do a podcast, I enjoy it. So, this was Dylan Miller on Daily Dose Dylan. Google Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio. This was Dylan Miller on Daily Dose Dylan. Have a good day. See you tomorrow.